The wind from the sea, carrying the scent of salt and distant lands, drifted over the dark surface of the eastern Mediterranean. Somewhere beyond the horizon, on the rocky coast of Phoenicia, in the city of Tyre, one woman, an exile and a ruler, was preparing a journey that would change the map of the ancient world. Her name was Elisa, but the Greeks would call her Dido. She was leaving her homeland not as a fugitive, but as a founder. Behind her lay court intrigues, the death of her husband, and the threats of her brother, the king. Ahead of her, a voyage across the sea, and the birth of a new city that would live, fight, and die beneath another sun. Suggest new topics in the comments and subscribe to the channel. Here we talk about history, from ancient legends to modern tales, from historical facts to mysterious plots. Make yourself comfortable. We begin.
The Phoenician ships, narrow and swift, with high prows carved with symbols of Baal and Tanit, glided over the waves. They carried not only people and provisions, but a language, a culture, and the undying Phoenician gift for trade and seafaring. These were people accustomed not to conquering with the sword, but to winning through persuasion, treaties, and wealth. Their cities stretched along the coasts like links of a trade chain, from the Levant to Cyprus, from Cyprus to Sicily. And now, a new jewel was about to be added to that chain. Landing on the coast of North Africa, where the warm winds of the Sahara met the sea breeze, Elisa concluded a treaty with the local Berber king, Iarbas. The land was fertile, and the bay was perfect for a harbor. The site was chosen with Phoenician precision. The city was named Carthage, New City. Thus, around 814 years before Christ, Carthage was born. No one could have foreseen that this new settlement would one day become one of the greatest powers of the ancient Mediterranean and the terror of Rome.
In the years that followed, Carthage became a city of builders. From clay and stone, walls began to rise. Temples were raised to Tanit, goddess of the moon and fertility, and to Baal Hamon, lord of the blazing sun. The people prayed to their gods for prosperity, and they built with confidence that prosperity would come. Streets were planned straight and orderly. Workshops filled the lower quarters. Blacksmiths, potters, shipwrights, and traders. The scent of cedar wood, melting bronze, and freshly baked bread drifted through narrow alleys. The heart of the city, the Barca citadel, stood proudly above the bay, a fortress and a symbol of strength. From its walls, the new rulers could see the endless blue of the sea, their true domain. The harbor was Carthage's lifeblood. At dawn, the air rang with the sound of hammers and ropes. Sailors shouted orders, merchants counted goods, and dock workers loaded amphorae filled with olive oil, wine, and grain. Soon, the city's ships would spread across the known world, to Sicily, Sardinia, and even beyond the Pillars of Hercules, where Atlantic winds whispered of lands unknown. Unlike many powers of their time, the Carthaginians did not seek conquest through war. Their empire was one of commerce, woven through contracts, colonies, and coin. Gold and silver from Spain, timber from Lebanon, grain from Africa's fertile plains, all flowed into Carthage. And with each deal struck, its influence grew stronger than any sword. Yet wealth alone was not what defined them. It was their sense of order, their ability to turn the chaos of trade into a carefully balanced system. 2 suffets governed the city each year, elected from the great merchant families. A council of elders advised them, while the people's assembly gave voice to the citizens. For centuries this structure would endure, stable, pragmatic, and fiercely proud. Religion and commerce walked hand in hand. Every voyage began with an offering. Every new contract was sealed before the gods. Even the coins bore their images, the crescent of Tanit, the horns of Baal-Hamon. To trade, to build, to worship. In Carthage, these were one and the same. And so the city flourished. Ships came and went, fortunes rose and fell, but Carthage stood unshaken, proud, radiant, alive. A new power had taken root on the African shore, and the Mediterranean was beginning to feel its pulse.
As Carthage grew, so did its influence, and behind the wealth of merchants and the bustle of the harbour stood something greater, a system. Order where others had chaos, discipline where others had chance. This was the secret of Carthage. The government of the city was neither monarchy nor democracy, but a careful balance between power and prudence. 2 suffets, magistrates chosen each year, presided over civic affairs, trade, and war. They were watched by a council of elders, the most powerful men of the merchant class, whose fortunes bound them to the fate of the city. Above all, there was the People's Assembly, a reminder that even in this city of traders, the citizens still had a voice. It was a system born not of ideology, but of experience, of generations who had seen empires rise and fall. Carthage did not dream of kings. It trusted in balance, in order, in the slow rhythm of prosperity. Every decision weighed like gold on a merchant's scale. Yet beneath that order there was something unshakable: faith. Religion in Carthage was not confined to temples. It lived in every street, in every oath, every voyage, every transaction. The city's 2 great deities, Baal-Hamon and Tanit, stood as symbols of life and renewal, the burning sun and the fertile moon. Before every expedition, sailors brought offerings to the temple. Before every treaty, incense was burned and wine poured upon the sacred stones. Even the coins that crossed the sea bore their images, a silent promise that the gods of Carthage sailed with every merchant and returned with every prophet. This unity of faith and trade, of ritual and reason, gave Carthage a stability no rival could match. It allowed the city to govern faraway colonies in Sardinia, in Malta, in Spain, without the need for legions or emperors. Its power flowed not from conquest, but from connection. Still, Carthage was not without defense. Its fleet, sleek, fast, and disciplined, was the shield of its empire. Each ship a masterpiece of Phoenician craftsmanship, each crew trained with precision. The city that once rose from exile now ruled the waves with unshakable confidence. And so Carthage stood, rich, ordered, and devout, a power unlike any other in the ancient world, not built on conquest but on commerce, not ruled by kings but by balance. And in that balance lay both its strength and the seed of its greatest trials to come. By the 6th century before Christ, Carthage was no longer just a city. It was a force that spanned the sea. Its ships traced invisible lines across the Mediterranean, linking a vast network of colonies, outposts, and trade partners. From the sands of Africa to the silver mines of Iberia, from the islands of the west to the bustling ports of the east, Carthage's reach seemed endless. Each colony carried a piece of the mother city with it, a temple to Tanit, a market square, a governor's house, and a harbour filled with Phoenician sails. But these were not conquered lands, they were bonds of commerce and cooperation. The Carthaginians did not impose their rule with armies, they persuaded, negotiated, and traded, and through that trade they quietly ruled. Merchant fleets moved like clockwork, bringing back copper and tin from Spain, amber from the north, ivory from Africa, and spices whose scent clung to the very timbers of the ships. Markets overflowed with goods from every shore, and the city's treasuries gleamed with foreign silver. Carthage had become the beating heart of a commercial empire, an empire of winds and waves. But prosperity also brings envy. In the Greek colonies of Sicily and southern Italy, whispers began to spread that the Carthaginians sought to rule the Western Sea. Tensions simmered between merchant fleets and Greek triremes. Ports once open to trade began to close their gates. The world of commerce was turning toward conflict. The first clashes came quietly. A captured ship, a disputed island, a raid that went too far. But soon those sparks would ignite into flame. Carthage, mistress of trade, was about to learn the price of ambition. The Greeks of Syracuse, proud and ambitious themselves, saw Carthage as a rival to be challenged. The wars that followed were fierce and costly, fought not for land, but for control of the sea. And through these trials, Carthage forged something new, a strength that was no longer just economic, but military, strategic, and deeply determined. By the dawn of the 4th century before Christ, Carthage stood among the great powers of the Mediterranean. Its merchants were wealthy, its generals seasoned by war, its fleet unmatched. But across the sea there was another power coming to challenge everything Carthage had built: the city of Rome.
For centuries, Carthage ruled the Western Sea. Its fleets carried gold and grain, its merchants spoke every language of the coast. But across the waters of the Tyrrhenian, a new power was rising, a city of disciplined soldiers and relentless ambition: Rome. At first their worlds barely touched. Carthage was the queen of trade, Rome a farmer's republic. Yet as Rome expanded through Italy, its gaze began to fall upon the same islands that guarded the western routes: Sicily, Sardinia, and Corsica. And where trade routes crossed, rivalry was inevitable. The first collision came in Sicily. Greek cities on the island sought allies, and both powers answered the call. What began as a local dispute soon drew the full weight of empires. In 264 before Christ, the First Punic War began, the greatest naval conflict the ancient world had ever seen. Carthage entered that war with confidence. Its navy was vast, its sailors unmatched. Rome, by contrast, had little experience at sea. But Rome learned quickly. Capturing a wrecked Carthaginian ship, they studied its design, copied it, and built hundreds of their own. Then they added something new: a boarding bridge, the corvus, turning sea battles into infantry fights where Roman discipline could prevail. For more than 20 years the struggle raged across the Mediterranean. Hundreds of ships burned, tens of thousands of men were lost. In the end, Carthage, exhausted and bankrupt, sued for peace. Sicily was ceded and indemnities imposed. The unthinkable had happened. Carthage had been beaten at its own game. But Carthage did not die. While Rome celebrated, the merchants of the city rebuilt. Trade routes reopened, fleets were restored, and new colonies in Spain began to rise, richer, stronger, and farther from Rome's reach. In those distant lands, a young general would soon emerge, the son of Hamilcar Barca. His name was Hannibal. The rivalry between Carthage and Rome was no longer a contest for trade or islands. It had become something far greater, a struggle for supremacy itself. Two worlds, two visions, set on a collision course that would shape the destiny of the Mediterranean and the course of history forever.
In the years after Carthage's defeat, its empire seemed broken, but only on the surface. Far to the west, in the hills and mines of Iberia, a new Carthage was rising, a city of soldiers and merchants, led by a family whose name would echo for centuries, the Barcids. Hamilcar Barca, hero of the First War, had sworn that his sons would never forgive Rome. When he died, his mantle passed to his son-in-law Hasdrubal, and then at last to his eldest boy, a young commander of fierce will and brilliant mind, Hannibal. From the moment he took command, Hannibal's ambition was clear. He rebuilt Carthage's armies, forged alliances with Iberian tribes, and secured vast mines of silver to fund his campaigns. But Rome was watching, uneasy at Carthage's growing strength. When Hannibal besieged the city of Saguntum, a Roman ally, the Senate declared war. The Second Punic War had begun. But Hannibal would not wait for the Romans to come to him. He would take the war to them, on a scale no one had dared to imagine. In the spring of 218 before Christ, he marched from Spain with 90,000 men, thousands of horses, and a small army of African war elephants. His path led north, across the Pyrenees, through Gaul, and into the unknown wilderness of the Alps. What followed was a march of legend. For 15 days, the army fought through blizzards and landslides, attacked by mountain tribes, haunted by cold and hunger. Men slipped from icy cliffs, horses stumbled into ravines, and elephants trudged through snow they had never seen. Of the vast host that had left Spain, barely half reached the other side. But those who did emerge from the Alps found themselves in the heart of Italy, an army battered but unbroken. The Romans, expecting invasion by sea, were stunned to see Carthaginian banners descending from the mountains. From that moment, Hannibal began a campaign that would haunt Roman memory forever. At Trebia, at Lake Trasmene, and at last at Cannae, his genius reshaped the art of war. He used terrain, timing, and deception with a mastery that generals would study for 2,000 years. Even outnumbered, he turned Rome's strength against itself, and for a time he seemed unstoppable. But victory on the battlefield was not enough. No reinforcements came from Carthage, and the Italian allies did not rise as he hoped. Year after year, he held his ground, waiting for a chance that never came. And though Rome bled, it did not break. Hannibal's war was now a test of endurance, of will, strategy, and fate.
For more than 15 years, Hannibal remained in Italy, a shadow that haunted Rome. No army dared meet him in open battle. Villages fled at the sound of his name. Yet even as he won victories, he could not win the war. Rome, patient and relentless, changed its strategy. It avoided direct confrontation, cut off his supplies, and struck instead at Carthage's lifelines: Spain, Sicily, and the islands of the Western Sea. Slowly, piece by piece, they strangled Carthage's empire. Then, in 204 before Christ, a new Roman general rose to prominence: Publius Cornelius Scipio, brilliant, daring, and unafraid. He carried the war back to Africa. For the first time in decades, the enemy stood before the gates of Carthage itself. Summoned home, Hannibal left Italy behind. He had crossed mountains and rivers, fought in every corner of the land, but now he would face his final battle on the soil of his own people. At Zama, in 202 before Christ, two masters of war met at last. The battle was fierce and desperate. Hannibal's elephants charged, but Scipio had prepared, opening lanes for them to pass harmlessly through. Then came the clash of infantry. Roman and Carthaginian shields locked together, each side fighting for survival. When the dust settled, Hannibal was defeated. Carthage sued for peace. The terms were harsh. Carthage lost its fleet, its territories, and its right to wage war without Rome's consent. The city that had once ruled the sea was now a client, bound by treaty and tribute. Hannibal, ever proud, refused to surrender his spirit. He entered politics, reformed the city's finances, and restored its strength. But Rome's hatred endured. Hunted across the Mediterranean, Hannibal lived out his final years in exile. In the court of kings and allies of fortune, he was still the same commander, sharp, defiant, and untamed. When Roman agents came for him at last, he chose his own end. "Let us deliver Rome from her long anxiety," he said quietly, and drank the poison he carried with him always. With Hannibal's death, the last flame of Carthage's greatness dimmed. Yet even then the Romans feared it. Half a century later, they would return, not to conquer, but to erase. In 146 before Christ, Carthage was besieged, burned, and leveled to the ground, its walls torn down, its name consigned to legend. But legends endure. From the ashes of that fallen city, the story of Carthage lived on, a story of brilliance and defiance, of empire, ambition, and loss, and of one man who dared to challenge Rome itself: Hannibal Barca, the Lion of Carthage. Long after its walls were torn down and its harbors filled with dust, Carthage did not vanish. The Romans might have erased the city, but they could not erase its memory. For even in victory, Rome had inherited much from the people it destroyed. From Carthage came the art of navigation, the skill of trade, the craft of shipbuilding and diplomacy. Its merchants had mapped the edges of the known world, sailing beyond the Pillars of Hercules, down the coast of Africa, perhaps even farther than history remembers. In the quiet of Roman ports, their legacy still lingered, in the design of ships, the balance of coins, and the stories told by old sailors of the Western Sea. In time, Rome rebuilt the city it had destroyed.
A new Carthage rose under the empire, Roman in law, Latin in tongue, but Phoenician still in spirit. Its streets once again filled with markets and laughter, its harbors with ships bound for Egypt, Spain, and the East. Even in ruin, Carthage refused to die. It became a city reborn, a bridge between worlds, between Africa and the Mediterranean, between memory and myth. And yet, the echo of its past remained. Poets spoke of Dido and Aeneas, of love and betrayal, of a queen who cursed Rome with her dying breath. Historians wrote of Hannibal, the man who defied an empire and almost unmade it. To the Romans, Carthage was a warning, a mirror showing what greatness could cost. To the world that came after, it was a legend, proof that no empire, no matter how mighty, is beyond the reach of time. So when the wind moves over the ruins of Tunis, where the sea still touches the shore of ancient Barca, listen carefully. You may hear the echoes, the creak of ships in the harbor, the cry of traders in the square, the voice of a queen setting sail toward destiny. Elissa, Dido, and the city she built, Carthage, eternal, remembered and reborn in story.